And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 14 of UnSpun with myself, Jan Irvin, my co-host, Joe Atwill, and tonight our special guest, Kim Cooper in Australia. And we're going to be discussing families, and there's so much information out there to help people break up a family, to help them get a divorce, to help them I don't know. I mean, if you were in a workplace or if it were your own children, the solutions wouldn't always be about breaking up and separation and things like that. So there must be something else to look at in regard to families, especially couples, husbands and wives. And so this episode is to discuss things that aren't talked about in the mainstream, in psychology circles, et cetera, and family therapy regarding how to keep a marriage together even under the most extreme circumstances, and how to take control of what can be a bad to worse situation. So, Joe, did you have anything you wanted to add to that before we give it to Kim?
Right. Well, in my opinion, there is malfeasance in the government. The government uses all sorts of weaponized anthropology to create basically a class of people that are easy to control. And the primary focus of the weaponized anthropology is the family. And so even though it may seem bizarre, if you look at the malevolence of Edward Bernays, the evil of Gordon Wasson, the treachery of Ken Kesey, all of the sophists, in the
Gloria Steinem.
The Ms. Magazine article trying to justify, the welfare approach to the poor Americans that would destroy the family. I mean, all of these things, they seem really disparate. But in fact, they're all focused against the family. The family is the primary target, in my opinion, because it actually creates the exact phenomena that the oligarchs are trying to avoid, which is to say healthy, strong-minded citizens. And so when I exchange information with Kim, I was really both fascinated and amazed at kind of the problems that she was dealing with, because Kim knows the problems of family, destruction from the perspective of someone who has tried to do therapy to keep families together. And so with that, I wanted to introduce everyone to Kim. Hi, Kim. Well, thank you so much for coming. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about what you do?
Hi, Joe, and hi, Jan, and thanks so much for having me on the show. Look, my story...
Right, so very briefly, sorry, Kim, just very briefly, we lost signal, and so we're going to have Kim just start over where she began, actually. So go ahead, Kim.
Okay, well... Steve and I had a rocky relationship, a rocky marriage right from the start, before we were married even. But things had got to the point by around 2005 where I was at home for, pretty much full time with 3 kids under 10, trying to figure out how to afford to feed them most of the time. And Steve was working as a bartender and out late most nights, and most of the time I really didn't know where he was. And then when he was home, we were really just fighting. And, it really was that bad. It was actually worse than that. I had debt collectors that I was fending off. And, really we had really hit Skid Row. And I was not getting any, having any success in getting Steve to actually be more responsible or to help me pull things back together. So when I actually started to ask for help, which is pretty embarrassing, and went out and started actually talking to the professionals, I was really quite dismayed when people started to inform me that Steve probably had this personality disorder called narcissistic personality disorder, and that basically this was something that was incurable, and that I really was basically an idiot if I didn't just divorce him and have no further contact with him. That really shocked me. I was already scared and in a pretty bad situation. But I guess since I'd grown up in a medical family, my dad was a doctor and my mother was a nurse, I also was suspicious that, somebody could be diagnosed with something that these people hadn't even met. And there was this thing like leprosy, I was just meant to, except, even with a leper, I guess they would have had more sympathy. And they were really, telling me that Steve was this sort of kind of psychopath. And so, things were pretty bad with us. I'm not pretending otherwise. But I was pretty determined, and, I'm a bit of a researcher. And so I thought, well, diagnosis is, 99% of the cure. I'll go and I'll find out about this thing called narcissistic personality disorder. Well, when I did that, I ran into this fellow online called Sam Vaknin. He called himself Dr. Sam Vaknin. And this whole story unwound it. Anyway, I was really suspicious of this guy. He was really seductive. I was watching him just send women literally mad from the things he was writing. He's got this book that at the beginning basically says, all ye who enter here, leave all hope behind, basically. And sort of encouraging people to get into a mentally ill person's head, which didn't seem like a real smart idea to me. So I started researching this, and I really didn't get much hope from psychology and all the different. So basically, to cut a long story short, after a lot of trial and error, I ended up moving towards parent training and corporate leadership training, because they were areas where they were giving advice about how to manage difficult people, but not being able to say, leave or divorce a person or just chuck them out as an answer. Because obviously, you can't really divorce your kids, and any manager who, is worth a grain of salt can't just sack every employee that he has a problem with. And so, that was really my beginning to all of this. So anyway, the things that I started putting into practice started working. I kept notes on my research and the things I was learning for myself, really primarily in the beginning. And, when they actually did have a fairly dramatic and positive effect on my family, then I really became encouraged. And then after a year or so, Steve and I kind of felt embarrassed about it. Australians are a lot more private than Americans about talking about their private relationship stuff. In America, they do it on TV and all over the place. They're not so like that here. But we just saw so many families out there who were still struggling that we really just couldn't keep quiet. And so that's when we put our first website online, which is probably maybe 8 years ago now. And since then, I've written, I think, 7 books on the subject, a lot of them short, a lot of them with pictures. And we now have an online publishing business. We've had over 2,000 testimonials from people saying that we've helped them. And this has actually turned into a full-time job, which is actually what we do to support ourselves.
So after all of this with Steve, the short version of the story is that you didn't end in divorce. And
No.
so Steve is still around. Is that correct? And this has been more than a decade now.
Oh, yeah. We've got the best marriage in the world now. We really do. And no, he's not going anywhere. He's actually here. He's helping.
Does Steve want to stick his face in the camera?
He's going, no. He's holding up my time cards for me to try and keep me from going over time with my answers.
Well, it would seem, because of the testimonials and the success that you've had, that you might be basically representing skills that the Australian government would support. What has been your relationship with the government in general?
Oh, well, actually, at one point, they were actually competing against us for advertising, and with some thing that they had that really was basically offering people really nothing except for some graphic design. And no, we worked for a really long time trying, putting stuff together, putting our testimonials together, putting all our evidence together to present to the police and to present to the social workers and community service people here. And, we got a lot of, from individual people, they really liked what we were doing. But when it got to any level of them actually officially endorsing what we were doing, we would sort of just get the answers like, oh, it all seemed pretty improbable. That was just kind of that. And I guess, I got far enough into it and I understand enough about, the kind of subjects that you delve into and talk about that it was probably best not to continue down that path. I worked in the music industry a long time ago, in the independent music industry, and I learned then that sometimes trying to get help from people isn't actually going to be helpful. You're better to just keep on, doing what you can on your own.
In the United States and in Europe, the environment for family creation is dismal. I would say all of the statistics are negative. In other words, there are fewer and fewer of them each year. Certainly the population demographics are basically in collapse. What's it like in Australia? Is it difficult to create a family, or is the cultural milieu that surrounds family production positive? Do people look forward to starting families, or are there obstacles to doing so?
The Australian culture is still very based around family, but I do think that there are some very extreme problems culturally facing families that's probably really worldwide. Well, definitely in the Western world. I think the most obvious is that men are really not being encouraged or rewarded for their role as husbands and fathers. I think quite the opposite. More and more they're being encouraged to spend more and more time away from their home. Then when women or their wives complain about that, they're told, they should put their big girls' panties on and just get used to it and, be tougher. I don't really think that that's fair, and at the same time, the men are then often accusing their wives of not giving them enough authority in their households. And that's kind of pretty difficult because it's hard to have authority, when you're not there, when you're absent and you're not there. I think the other less obvious problem is something that I really uncovered that began with me studying narcissistic personality disorder and its corresponding sort of dysfunction, or whatever you want to call it, which is codependence. Now, these started out as medical terms that I was researching, and we've really kind of redefined those, I think, into much broader role models that I think is really more produced culturally through families than it is through government. I think to start with, to explain this, I have to, relate to your work, Joe, and, you really show how strong families are not always a positive thing. We have the Flavians were a strong family, but, what did they actually do for society or even for the individual?
Yeah, that's a different stat. I mean, this is a strong family that uses their strength against society instead of, the society being against the family itself.
Yeah, that's right. But really, I mean, I look at families as a system. And if you're looking at a system, you have to, your word produce is an interesting one, Joe, because it's, what does a system produce? And unfortunately, culturally, too many of our families are run by parents who are are grooming their children into roles that are really just serving their own immature emotional needs. So, you know, there'll be one child who's groomed for success in the outside world and that they're meant to bring the honor and the glory home. This is the more narcissistic child. And then there'll be another child in the family who's groomed more to be the emotional caretaker for one or both parents. And, you know, each of these children will have a completely different set of rules that they're taught for how to operate and how to see life. And really the problem is that they're very incompatible. And so then, you know, the achiever type of person, as they grow up, they want a caretaker. They tend to be attracted to and marry a caretaker type person. But this sort of grooming or, you know, way that they've been taught to see the world is so different that it's kind of nearly guaranteed right from the outcome they're not going to be able to, or I mean right from the beginning, that they're really not going to be able to negotiate or play team with each other because they're not on the same page at all. Now, you know, the stereotype is that it's the male child that's actually turned into the achiever in the family and the girls that are actually become the emotional caretakers. But it certainly isn't this black and white. You know, one example is the military, you know, that gives all of these awards and honors to people that are members of the military. But yet the military is a very codependent organization that really produces a lot of codependence in people. The people who join the military are taught very much that they have to sort of keep the peace and not rock the boat and not threaten the status quo, and that they really have to basically, you know, keep their superiors happy. And this is very much a codependent role. So there's a lot of, you know, conflict in those two. Another example, which is, you know, closer to home for me, is I'm the eldest daughter in a family with no brothers. And it's very common for eldest daughters in my situation to end up being expected to play both roles. And really that makes you face the fact of just how incompatible those roles are, because most people faced with that situation, you know, basically just end up in some kind of identity crisis because, you know, one person can't really contain that many contradictions really within one identity.
Do you feel that the government is promoting the creation of family in general, or does the government perhaps have an agenda against it? What is your sense of, or is the government completely neutral? I mean, what is your sense as to how the Australian government relates to family production?
You know, it's very hard to sort of isolate Australia as a culture. Because so much of what we see comes out of the United States and comes out of other countries, you know, our TV and our movies and everything. And, you know, I think that they're actually working against family in so many ways that there's actually, you know, I could talk about that all week. So what I've done is I've actually got a list here and you know, it says at the top government, media and corporate interference. And, you know, it's great that you guys probably actually understand that they're all sort of similar and merge into each other. So what I want to do is if I just read this out and then, you know, I've got good stories about all these points and you can maybe just choose one that, you know, we talk about because there's just so many. Okay, so I've got corporations are producing advertising that deliberately keeps us immature. That's one big problem for families. We've got feminism, but only as a part of a larger campaign that is pitting women against men, you know, pitting them against each other. We have police and social services who are putting pressure on families in crisis to separate. Women in the US are even being jailed for not protecting their children by leaving their abusive husband, even though the statistics actually show that that'll often leave her and the children in more danger. Not a lot of valor in the system there.
Can you give us an example of that? Because, you know, we did a show a couple of weeks ago and mentioned a article from Ms. Magazine, Black Macho and the Myth of the Superwoman. And I made the accusation that it seemed that the article was propaganda, and it came from, really dubious sources. I won't go into it now, but it created the impression that, to me, that it was just done as propaganda to support the government welfare structure, whereby a family that was broken up, in other words, a single mom with children, would receive money, whereas a family that stayed together would have a much harder time getting any funding from the government. So that struck me as a kind of a hidden agenda against family, and so I'm just wondering, have you ever had a sense that anything like that might be, other than just in the normal Western media that as you point out, Australia is suffering from?
No, that's definitely the case here. I know of many families who actually pretend that they're separated so that they're eligible for financial assistance that they wouldn't be eligible for if they were together.
Good.
Yeah, it's quite common here, actually. It's seen as an aspirational thing to do.
Wow.
To actually pretend that you're divorced so that you can get assistance and save towards a deposit on a house. Yeah, it's that bad. But you also have this situation where they're not being honest about the fact that 70% of the really serious assaults and homicides that happen at a domestic level happen after the couple are actually pulled apart, when they didn't really want to be divorced. And then because you have system failure at this point, and there's people in the system who feel like they've got nothing left to lose, and so they start doing really desperate things. Yet at the same time, when women actually go looking for help, they just turn around and they actually say, oh, well, it's your fault that you don't just leave. You're stupid if you don't just leave. So just quickly, I'll keep going with my list. There's emotional pornography in popular culture and TV. Obviously, there's pornography that's become more easily available, but there's also emotional pornography, which is at one point. There's the neo-feudalism that YouTube documents so well, that's brainwashing our teenagers not to spend time learning to become solid parents and citizens. Then we've got sort of more problems with logic, like individual problems that are being blamed on general causes, and general indications of system failure, like the divorce rate, and etc., being blamed on really specific causes, where that's sort of a bit dubious. Could there really be one cause for such a general, general big problem? And then we've also got the government school system, which is excluding parents' input and authority, which really ties in, I think, at its baseline to profiling, which gets to my last point, which is, the deliberate confusion that's being created around profiling mental health disorders that lead to criminality. And, this comes right back to where we started, where there's women looking for help with their basically just immature and irresponsible husbands. That is happening because society isn't encouraging men into these roles and isn't rewarding men for these roles, and is actively encouraging them away from them. But then when the women actually go looking for help, they're actually really being traumatized and brainwashed that their husbands are some kind of psychopath, and that it's really their own fault if they don't just sort of really get strong enough to just shut him out of their life.
Did you, when you studied this, when you studied this, did you come across anyone putting out information to help the family stay together in such grave situations?
None at all. As far as I'm aware of, at my best-selling book, Back from the Looking Glass, is the only reference book that actually gives advice to a family member that's in an abusive situation and doesn't actually want a divorce, of what they should do. When I wrote that, I just sort of thought, well, wow, there isn't one, and so every police station and library will want a copy of this. But no, that isn't how it worked out. They seem to really do. I can't be sure, but they really seem to have a vested interest in actually breaking families apart.
Well, first of all, Kim, I want to thank you for sharing that list, which was absolutely couldn't be more important. And I hope that people who listen to the show will find copies of tapes of what you said and disseminate it widely throughout our world, because that's information that every young person should know. Every single young person that we have in our culture should know this, that those areas have been, that surround them as a culture are all trying to keep them from being successful in creating families. And
there's just so many obstacles today.
Yeah.
With transhumanism, with what we call metrosexuals, with the rock and pop music culture, and all of this stuff, with, as you're pointing out, Kim, family therapy and advice and all of this stuff. On every level, there's all of these attacks going on. And, the only way to fight this type of nonsense is to be aware of it. And so, and having you on the show and, just helping people, become aware of this type of situation, because at least if you're aware of it, you can begin to alter your course, alter your children's education and what they know. There's, like you mentioned, pornography, and I've had Gary Wilson on my show a couple of times, who's exposed the whole pornography fraud. But all of these types of things, open relationships, all of this stuff, it focuses the couple's energy outside. It's always being redirected outside rather than focusing on your future together and the family's future. There's all of these distractions, and then coupled with, half the population or more gets divorced. So all of this, it's like, if you screw up in a marriage, just get divorced, get another one. It becomes like replaceable, you're going to go and buy a new car every, 5 or 10 years or whatever. And so people need to realize that all of these obstacles and tricks essentially are being placed in front of them so that they can make clear and concise decisions and see this level of propaganda come at them when it does, and know how to react accordingly to it.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jan. And I mean, that sort of comes under these sort of general indications that are then being blamed on specific causes. So you've got this general divorce rate. You've got people, having multiple relationships and not happy about that. And rather than actually looking at the true underlying causes of this, which is, a cultural change that needs to happen within families. It's a cultural shift that needs to happen of us moving away from...
It's Huxley's Brave New World.
Yeah, moving away from these roles of codependence and narcissism, becoming aware of them and unlearning them and learning better roles. What we're doing instead is that we're being told, it was just bad luck, and, your soulmate's still waiting out there for you, and just have another spin of the chocolate wheel.
Kim, this is just really valuable information, and I want to be sure that we spend some time. I want to come back to all these points, but because of the crisis in the success of the oligarchs to disrupt the production and the creation of families, I was hoping that you would spend some time sharing with us the things that people can do to keep families together, because I know that you are a specialist in that area, and that is, obviously we're under attack. That's just clear. Okay. And if you know you're under attack, and particularly if you know the specific details of the attack as in the list you gave, you're much better off. But you also need to know the ways that families can be kept together. Can you share some of your insights in that with us?
Sure. I think first things first is, the unlearning and what we need to move away from. And, and that is this just really schmaltzy kind of, marriage platitudes that we're being given, like this chicken soup for the soul business, and actually taking this seriously, that what we need instead of that is we need serious cultural change, and that really can only happen from within families. So, and really, if you're in the role of a husband or wife or a mother or a father, you have to take that as seriously as you would take as if you were the leader in the CEO in an organization. You need the same skills. You need leadership skills. You need negotiation skills. There's a whole raft of skills that you need if you actually want to run a successful system. You have to decide, what kind of system do we want to run? Is it going to be one that just serves the parents' and immature emotional needs? Is it going to be a system that just serves the family's glory? Or is it going to be a system that actually, is cohesive enough to stay together and provide security and safety for its members, but still let the individuals within that system actually, grow to maturity and actually reach their potential? If you want this, that's what we do. We train people in that. And we've got, 4 areas we break our work down into, which is, attachment, how people attach in a healthy way. I'll give you a quick takeaway on that is, we're really being encouraged to attach with people in very unhealthy ways. Finding a common enemy is a really poor way to form attachments with other people. And that's being something that's, we're being encouraged to do all the time. You're much better to form attachments with people based on, sharing similar values, or, based on sharing things that you value or that you like. We need to take the time to spend face-to-face time with each other. We're wired for that. We're wired to talk to each other and interact with each other. And the TV and all this media we see really interrupts that. The face on the TV keeps smiling at us no matter what we do, if we're picking our nose or whatever. And
smile
so then,
for the camera, Kim.
So then if we start talking to our partner and they don't like us picking our nose, we're like, hey, well, the girl on the TV just keeps smiling. It's like, there's so much to it, honestly. So there's attachment theory and see all the research. We've got fantastic research on all this now. We can fall back on stuff that we know works. There's attachment theory. Then we do work on helping people learn to limit abuse, setting boundaries effectively instead of using emotional manipulation. Don't get angry at him. Separate your bank account. Yes, you can do that, but so you don't get divorced. You don't have to do that just when you get divorced. Learning how to just socially stand up for ourselves in ways that are socially competent without yelling and screaming or creating conflict. How to deal with the little jibes and put downs that we all dish out to each other to test each other with. And more serious limiting abuse cases, stuff we teach for people who need it. There's also emotional intelligence training. Most of us have just not been educated about our emotional center at all. Our mental centers and our physical centers are educated from the time we are young and we enter school, but our emotional training is just left entirely to chance. Most people, if you ask them just a simple question, are anger and jealousy bad things? They really wouldn't know the answer of what those things are for, or what, they're important things. We need to understand our emotions. Our emotions actually guide us through life if we know how to read those signals. And then the last area that we work on with people is developmental gap work. And that's just actually being honest enough to sit down and just scan it and just say, okay, with yourself and your partner, what are our gaps, because particularly if a couple have the same gaps, this can become a really serious blind spot for them, that can end up really affecting their kids badly. So it's not simple, there's not one simple, just, easy answer. But I guess the good news is that, if, we're working with primarily with people who are taking this on completely on their own. I mean, I affected the cultural shift in my family on my own. I had a lot of opposition from Steve when I first started implementing these new ideas. He came around eventually. And he likes it a lot better now than how things used to be. But you know, if women can do this on their own, how much easier is this if both of the people in the marriage decide, hey, yeah, we just need to get in and learn more about this, you know? And okay, it's not overnight, and there is a lot to learn. But at the same time, you know, you're really just guaranteed to become more effective at it. Just like if you went and did a business training course, you know, you'd get better at managing your business.
Right. And that's the last thing that we would ever get in our culture is any programs to, you know, teach this wisdom and these techniques.
Well, you know, and talk about a vast open field to actually provide that, you know, not just in Australia, Kim.
Absolutely. Well, you know,
you're telling me.
You know, and I'll tell you something. This has to be, like so many things, something which comes up from inside our own culture. In other words, the government and the medical establishment are completely compromised, in my opinion. I mean, they are, from Freud through MK Ultra onto the current, you know, subjecting people to these meds. You know, if they have a problem, there's a drug that is.
Well, there's a drug deficiency. You know.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they had these drugs deficiencies are popping
nothing
up.
Wrong with the diet, nothing wrong
Yeah.
with the water, nothing else
Right.
going on. Just you need the you have a deficiency in our drug.
Drugs. Well, anyway, so you know, you can see that just looking at this, you know, in a quick overview, you can see that there's malfeasance, that there is some evil force in back of all this. We just couldn't get to, you know, so many clear focuses on things which destroy families, right? It just couldn't. This number of them and this array, you know, it just wouldn't happen accidentally. So we are under attack, and so if we're going to fix it, we're going to have to do this on our own. We have to really learn to ignore the medical practitioners, in my opinion, because I mean, I'm sure there are some good psychiatrists out there, but man, how could a layperson ever tell, you know, the corrupt from the good? You know,
well, that's a good question. And, you know, in fact, I know one. Maybe we should have her on sometime. And in fact, I'm 90% sure she's watching right now. So
well, good. And you know,
You'd be amazed how many marriage counselors and really actually highly qualified, really high level psychologists and psychiatrists actually come to me for mentoring.
Well, you know, and, you know, another thing, it's like, you know, medical professionals. And then I've had people like Dr. Scott Sharon, who's fully aware of the low-fat diet scam and how everybody's been made inflamed and sick with wheat and grains and sugars and stuff, and then told to eat a low-fat, low cholesterol diet, and this is just wreaking havoc. And you see across the board people turning around major health issues with this and without, you know, drugs. But I do see a lot of doctors, you know, from running the show for years that are trying to make a difference, but they're often on the outskirts and slowly seeding information into the mainstream medical profession.
One thing that I have thought would be a good idea would be to have an independent citizen review of medicine that would give a kind of seal of approval to those that weren't destructive. You know, I mean, I know that
sort of like a Yelp for doctors or something.
Exactly. Yeah. That we have to start with the assumption that they are destructive and have been trained to be destructive and you know, are able to damage us. But there probably are some very good ones. And so how can we find these? We need a way for the citizens to be able to like identify quickly those practitioners that are not damaging. But I think that your approach is really wonderful. You know, this kind of an organic approach, an approach that comes from the community and is focused on fixing the problem rather than just looking for alternative lifestyles to wander into because Do you ever work with nutrition or that kind of a component? Anything to do with if you see people are not eating properly or our lifestyles are bad, do you work with them in that way?
Well, we're not doctors. We don't see people face to face, but I certainly give that advice, and I certainly believe in it. My my dad was actually a doctor. He actually practiced in California right up until when he died of a stroke when he was 85. He was still working part-time at the Air Force Base there. And, by the end, he would have liked what you're saying because by the end, he had just seen the drugs that he first had trusted hurt so many people that he would really only prescribe things to people if they really, really twisted his arm. And then he'd still tell them that they were losers because they really should just be working on their diet and exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's so few medical issues that are not diet and nutrition related. I mean, if we throw out the last 50 years of medical advice on what we should be eating, we get a pretty solid foundation. Sally Fallon and the Weston A. Price Foundation, David Asprey, Denise Menger, Dr. William Davis, who wrote Wheat Belly. I've interviewed all of these people, and they're really, and Dr. Scott Sherr, et cetera. These are leading people, Dr. Kate Ram Blue, who have given society a new glimpse. And, I was in and out of hospitals in my own case for 15 years with what had primarily come down to issues from grains and a vegetarian diet. And then when you realize how dangerous grains are to eat at all, wheat especially, but, oatmeal, corn, all of them are pretty detrimental to our health. And you take the grains out and you increase your eggs, your butter, you eat the fat on your steak like Dad used to complain to you to do. And suddenly, wow, all of my health problems reversed. I dropped, I quit the stupid vegan religion, and I haven't seen the inside of a hospital for 6 years. So, since 2009, in 2009, I did a show from my hospital bed in Arequipa, Peru. But all of these things play into that, and no doubt, improper nutrition, a low-fat diet. Well, your brain is made of 70+% cholesterol, and it burns saturated fats. So if you're fat starving and cholesterol starving your brain, you're probably not going to be performing your best in a relationship either.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think at a similar level, this is what's going on with the health of families. Because, I mean, if you just go and you do a search on the internet, and you will be absolutely shocked at how many women out there that are just going over and over and over trying to diagnose what mental disorder their husband has. Is he a narcissist? Is he a sociopath? Does he have antisocial personality disorder? And, and we're in the middle of it sort of, trying to help these guys out of really this dark cave that they've found themselves in, saying you don't need to worry about that. You just need to worry about actually learning leadership skills and learning negotiation skills and learning attachment skills and learning the skills that you need to actually maintain, a healthy family. Just forget about trying to diagnose him.
Let me ask you something. What if you're dealing with somebody who really is a psychopath, who really is using gaslighting and NLP and NVC and all of these manipulative techniques to manipulate the partner, isn't being honest and upfront, is clearly doing.
We deal with that all the time. That's the main thing we deal with, and that's the thing is that see if you become somebody who is very grounded and very centered, who knows how to follow the signals of your own emotions, who knows how to self-soothe, isn't emotionally dependent on other people, which is different than, it's okay for us to be interdependent on each other. That's another subject.
Right.
But, that we actually understand and are able to read our own emotions, that you learn better skills in actually just, how you communicate and being able to, how trust is built, how attachment's built. Now, that doesn't always help this other person, but often it does. I mean, in my case, Steve went from being somebody who was completely manipulative, who was completely abusive, who completely lacked empathy towards me, and to somebody who's just the best guy in the world now. This really can happen, but it happens just in the same way as diet and positive diet and exercise can help all sorts of different health complaints on a physical level. The skills that we teach, help build balance and mental health within organizations, even not just families. People have used our stuff in corporations and told us that it's worked. We're dealing with psychopathic CEOs.
Yeah. One thing that I have seen is that if either party gains the wisdom that the relationship is a avenue to happiness, to basically to happiness, maybe too broad a term, but to a better life. What I have seen is that the attributes which can be characterized as neurotic become secondary to the energy to try to find a way to get the family, to continue to stay together. Once the individuals are focused on that and know that keeping it together is really where the best chance of happiness lies, then these neuroses, so-called, suddenly aren't nearly as inflamed and become quickly, in often cases, just overwhelmed by the skill developing that people will gain when they know, gee, this is really the goal. This is where I have to head. The problem is just getting that understood, that the lifestyle that Miley Cyrus is trying to lead you toward really doesn't go to a place where you're going to have a lot of satisfaction.
No, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
we do a lot of work, very scientific stuff about, states of our nervous system and vagal tone and vagus nerve response. When our parasympathetic nervous system is switched on, most of us, are really quite reasonable and easy people to deal with. But as soon as the person feels threatened and they're in defense, it's a whole different ball game. And we can't be responsible for necessarily keeping other people soothed and in a good state all the time. But when we become aware of that, we need to take responsibility of that for that ourselves, and that we don't have to sort of take it personally just because the other person is flipped out and their amygdala's, flipping out. Don't worry what he said when he was angry. He was just he doesn't even remember now. This is stuff that we can actually really use to actually start managing our own lives and managing our relationships with each other far more effectively. I just couldn't begin to tell you how dramatic the change has been in my own life. We've also taught a lot of these skills to our kids. One of my sons is actually high functioning on the autism spectrum. And, by sixth grade, he was voted a prefect at his school. That was after in second grade, he was actually expelled. And, he was so low on the social rung and we homeschooled him for a couple of years. These things work, we actually have the research. We know how people's skills work now, but it's only really mainly usually being taught at a corporate level. And so we're just taking all that stuff and giving all that good stuff to families that need it.
What a shock. Instead of weaponized anthropology, beneficial anthropology.
Yeah, you could call it that.
Yeah.
I guess we only know one anthropologist who even does that, don't we, Joe?
Only one I know. Well,
and Jay, that's been on the show.
Yeah, Jay I do know one anthropologist that is not weaponized, though, and David Price is another one I would cite. So, okay, so that's just absolutely fascinating. In fact, it's food for thought, Kim, and you've spun my mind here. I'm thinking about how these traits could be kind of, okay, so we're facing this problem. Do you have any thoughts, any suggestions as to how these skills can be disseminated? I mean, just say if one of our listeners goes, gee, this is a great idea. I really would like to have more people in my community that are having, marital trouble or thinking about starting.
Kim, are you doing like local groups and meetups and things like that?
How would these skills get disseminated? Have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I build automated systems, and we have a fairly mature and very well developed automated system online. If you live next door to me and you wanted help, I would send you to the same place that I'll send anyone who needs that help. I'll send you to now. That's a website called the ncmarriage.com, which stands for the Narcissistic Codependent Marriage. So it's just the NC Marriage. If you sign up there, there's a free introductory sort of course that gets you going. We do have books that we sell. We really appreciate people buying our books. That's what pays our rent. That's what keeps us going. We don't get any government assistance. And we've only just recently started risking spending a little bit of money on advertising, but we haven't even advertised for the last 4 or 5 years. People just find us from word of mouth. That's how much people actually tend to like our stuff when they do it. And through that, it's an autoresponder. And so, people get things in the sequence that they need them, so you start getting the emails and you follow through the process. And, people end up having a relationship with me through that autoresponder that they often feel is closer than anyone in their life. And, I'm not cynical about that. I don't actually take that lightly. It is set up to do that, to build trust and rapport, but also to help motivate people and support people to help them through these changes. Obviously we also have, other ways that we connect with people through. We've got a secret Facebook group and we've got a public Facebook group, and I actually do private mentoring with some people who get stuck or are in a really unusual situation as some people find themselves in. But by and large, really it's laid out in the books. That From the Looking Glass is in its 11th edition now. And, it's the book for really if you're in an abusive relationship and you need help. There's the Love Safety Net Workbook, which is a book of exercises that you can just work through individually or as a couple, or you can even have your kids work through. There's 10 Steps to Overcome Codependence. There's your Blind Spot and Emotional Stupidity, which is 2 books if you want to look at your own narcissism. Would be good ones to start with. And then other simpler books more for kids, just like the Little Book of Empathy, Love and Friendship, that just really just gives you the rules of how people actually make friends and how we get along with each other and how to become somebody that people have empathy for. Because the fact is that we're all selective with our empathy. We're not all empathetic to everyone. We really do decide who we're going to give empathy and who we're not going to give empathy to. And really from buying our books and supporting our work, I'm always wanting to take this further. The next project I want to work on is going to be called Happy Families, Healthy Minds. And that's all going to be multimedia, basically DVDs that can be, you can view online, or you can also be shown in schools and in churches and to groups that actually start to teach these skills more from a preventative approach rather than waiting until people are actually sort of, in the casualty ward, so to speak, their marriage.
I have a question for you. Have you ever I came across this guy last year, a Christian pastor, comedian by the name of Mark Gungor?
No.
Yeah, he's got a lot of material on YouTube that's, he's hilarious to watch. It's coming from the Christian perspective, but he's got a lot of really good ideas and material in his work.
Okay, fantastic. I'll check him out.
Yeah.
I mean, the gap we're trying to fill here, is just so big. It's really scary. And, I follow a lot of the conspiracy stuff online, and I think about it, and I read, and I love both of your work. But every single time, it all just boils down to, I come back to that I just have to keep doing what I'm doing, because this is the best way that I can possibly think of to really for us to fight back.
Right.
And it has to have
the family is the core of the attack. So why not? It makes the most sense to help support the family.
And, there's just so much joy to be found within our families, I'm sitting here looking at Steve smiling at me. He's helping me stay.
Steve can stick his hand in front of the camera.
I would like to be in your family for sure.
Hey, there he is. Hey, Steve.
Hey. God,
it's all true. Okay.
Well, so there it is. They attack us, but we fight back. And, first we identify the nature of the attack, the weaponized anthropology, all of the different cultural elements that are designed to basically make us into isolated and weak social components, easy to enslave. And so once we know them, we can avoid them. And then, of course, because we haven't been trained, at least in terms of our culture, in how to have the skills to create that structure that is really viable and healthy in a marriage, we have to kind of learn them. And so, Kim, you are the avant-garde, and that, I mean, in the literal sense, in terms of the battle, you are really, at the level of hand-to-hand combat. And I think it's wonderful, and you're to be commended. And it's just, let's hope that the movement grows, and that more and more people realize that, they may try to give us Miley Cyrus, and they may have, all the Madonna songs and meds that, a person can stomach, but we're not going to succumb to that. And we're going to fight back, and we're going to keep our people in existence, and we're going to have real families, and so
Amen,
we're to do
brother.
that. And to do that, we're going to develop these skills. And so gee, hats off, Kim. I'm proud of what you're doing, and I'm sure that Jan would agree with me that we'll do whatever we can to support your efforts.
And you know what? And Kim, before we wrap it up here, please give out your websites again.
Okay, so it's the ncmarriage.com, or we have another site which is narcissismcured.com.
Now, what's this? The Love Safety Net?
Yeah, the lovesafetynet.com, which will actually take you to my blog, I think. We've just rebuilt all of our sites for mobile, and I think that's pointing at my blog now. My blog has got, I've lost count, something like 60 articles or something. Quite a few of them are free. Some of them are members only. But the best place to start is really at the Love Safety Net. Is really at the ncmarriage.com.
All right.
And there's a sign up there's an email sign up on the front page of that. And we get so many responses from people that just say, man, when I put my email address on your website, I had no idea what was going to start. Because, you just think
we're just a quick summary here.
That's all.
So everyone, please support Kim's research. Check out her website. Support Joe, CaesarsMessiah.com, I think. postflaviana.org, gnosticmedia.com, triviumeducation.com for me. And that's a wrap.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into CCN. This unique network is dedicated to free and independent media. CCN was created with the belief that information is the common heritage of all beings, which is why our live stream high-definition broadcast is easily accessible and free to view. If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Having produced over 1,000 shows in 2015, which are all archived on YouTube. We look forward to bringing you more groundbreaking, cutting-edge information in 2016. For more information on what is on, please check out our broadcast guide for weekly updates. CCN broadcasts in multiple languages and features some key voices of our challenging times who are all in pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world. CCN belongs to you, the people, and it is up to you all to keep this network on the air. Please contribute to the Network Support Fund or visit the CCN shop. We thank you all for supporting free and independent media.